Bonjour et bienvenue à toutes et à tous. I'm Richard Shepro, and I'm the president of the Board of Trustees of the Alliance Française de Chicago. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's World Monuments in Paris lecture on the Potager du Roi, featuring Alexandra Bonnet, directeur of the École nationale supérieure du paysage et du Potager du Roi à Versailles. As someone who's written and lectured about the Potager du Roi myself, I'm particularly pleased to be introducing this program and Alexandra Bonnet. But before we start, I'd like to remind everyone we're using a Zoom webinar format. This means you'll be able to see the guest speakers, but not each other. And if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions, and we'll try to get them answered at the end of the talk. You're welcome also to use the chat to communicate with all participants. You might try telling us where you're watching from. This program is presented in partnership with the Alliance Française de Chicago and the Alliance Française Miami Metro, with communications support from the World Monuments Fund, the French Heritage Society, and the Fédération of Alliance Française USA. It's also made possible by a very generous support grant from Solange and Bill Brown. Potager du Roi was created de la Quintigny under the orders of and with the active participation of Louis XIV to supply the massive kitchens of the Chateau de Versailles with fruits and vegetables. And after many twists and turns, the Potager du Roi continues to pursue the triple mission that Quintigny and Louis XIV had of not only food production at the highest level, but also experimentation of many kinds and the transmission of knowledge. Today, located right next to the Chateau de Versailles in its original spot with original buildings, the Potager du Roi is open to visitors almost every day and home to the École nationale supérieure du paysage. That's the major school of landscape architecture. Now, just a few words about my friend Russell. Russell Kelly is the curator and moderator of the program about French, the history and heritage of France that we've had now. This is the 5th winter lecture series that he's moderated, and we're very appreciative of Russell's contribution. Russell is a font of knowledge. He's lived in Paris for 30 years. He's the author of The Making of Paris, the story of how Paris evolved from a fishing village into the world's most beautiful city. So I'll recommend that book to you and then say, à vous, Russell.
Thank you very much, Richard, for that plug for the book and for the introduction. And bonjour from sunny Palm Beach, Florida. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Alexandra Bonnet. Alexandre studied at not one, but 2 agricultural schools in France. The Institut National Agronomique Paris-Grignon, the National School of Agronomy, and the École nationale du génie rural et des eaux et forêts, the National School of Rural Engineering, Water Resources, and Forestry, which, as a result, accounts for her official title, if you go online, Ingénieur en chef des ponts, des eaux et des forêts, Engineer-in-Chief of Bridges, Water Resources, and Forestry. Alexandre then went on to get a master's degree in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School at Harvard University in Cambridge, where she focused on international trade and finance. Alexandra held positions in the Ministry of the Environment, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Marine Affairs, and the Ministry of Ecological Transition before being appointed director of the École Nationale Supérieure de Paysage, the Higher National School of Landscape Architecture, in 2021. She is the first woman to hold this position since the school was formed in 1680. Interestingly, before all of the above, Alexandra spent 4 years studying dance at the prestigious École de Danse dance school of the National Opera in Paris. À vous, Alexandra.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this cycle of webinars organized by the Alliance Française and WMF. As you said, dear Russell, I'm the director of the National School of Landscape Architecture. And I have to say, every day I feel very privileged to be part of a great school located at such a unique site, the Potager du Roi, the Kitchen Garden in Versailles. And I also feel very privileged to be part of a generous community that supports and loves international heritage sites. And thank you so much for your interest, all of you, in French culture. So welcome to the King's Kitchen Garden. Here we are. So the King's Kitchen Garden is located in the heart of Versailles and in the extraordinary vicinity of the castle that you can see here, the Cathedral of Versailles and the impressive Pont of the Suisse. So the Potager is over there. And as you may notice, our garden serves as a green lung, a breathing space for the people living in a highly mineralized Saint Louis district. The King's Kitchen Garden is exceptional, we think, for its beauty, its history, and the missions it continues to fulfill to this day. So we'll go over all of this during the presentation, but here are in a few words some key, and its main features. It was created at the request of Louis XIV between 1678 and 1683. And it was at that time an integral part of the castle of the Château de Versailles, which, let us remember, represents the largest construction project undertaken in the Western world since Roman times. And it is indeed a unique surviving example of a royal kitchen garden that is remarkable for its size, for its symbolic significance, but also for the place it holds in the long history of France. Today, the garden is fully classified as a historic monument. It's labeled as Jardin Remarquable, remarkable garden, and it is part of the National Estate of Versailles, listed at the UNESCO World Heritage Site. Since 1966, this is also the historic site of the National High School of Landscape Architecture, and for that reason, the school is therefore responsible for its maintenance, conservation, and promotion. So let's go over some key figures. In a nutshell, the garden spans 10 hectares, 24 acres, and includes 10,000 square meters of listed buildings. It is nurtured today by 16 highly skilled gardeners. And one unique feature that makes it interesting is that the garden serves as a school garden open to the public. And this is, I believe, the only example of that sort in France. So we train 400 learners in gardening and landscape design, and we also welcome up to 7,000 visitors annually, including 10,000 scholars, roughly. The kitchen garden continues to produce a wide variety, fruits, vegetables, whether heritage or modern varieties. So we are talking about the new King's Kitchen Garden. Louis XIV wanted a new kitchen garden to meet the needs of the ever-expanding court. So it is referred to as the third one because it was the third and final kitchen garden that was created within the chateau's outbuildings in the 17th century. And while it wasn't the only garden supplying the court, it was by far the largest and the most prestigious of all the royal kitchen gardens. And engravings are never absolutely accurate. And this one, you can have a look of the view from the hill Satori. And here you can see the potager, which doesn't look exactly that way, but still it gives an overview about the site at the beginning of the potager, which is interesting because the potager appears as a transitional space between a heavily wooded area over there and the countryside and then the city. So the creator of this unique garden, which we're about to discover, it's him, Jean-Baptiste de la Cantini, director of the Royal Fruit and Vegetable Gardens. In this role, he did not only created and managed the king as a kitchen garden, but also took care of the orange trees in the nearby orangery. And he oversaw there the arrangement of the trees, the pruning, the repotting process. So he works on both sides. And in fact, nothing in his background initially destined him for horticulture. He was born in 1626, and he first worked as a lawyer at the Parliament of Paris. He was a lawyer, and he accompanied a young nobleman. He was his tutor, and he accompanied him on a journey to Italy, which was common practice at that time for among great families. And this trip is said to have sparked his interest, his passion for gardening. And he apparently demonstrated an exceptional talent for gardening because he joined the team that was assembled by Nicolas Fouquet for the development of Vaux-le-Vicomte alongside André Lenôtre. And he got hired together with all the team by the king Louis XIV in 1670. He joined the king's superintendent of buildings under the authority of Colbert, and he was awarded a title specifically designed and created for him, which was director of the fruit and vegetable gardens of Royal Estates. So he passed away in 1688. So sadly, he didn't have much time to enjoy the potager. And at that time, he was working on his big work, his major work, which was called Instruction pour les jardins fruitiers et potagers avec un traité des orangers. But as he died, he passed away, it was his son, Michel, who released it in 1690. But as you can see, La Cantini was always committed to teaching and sharing his craft, making him probably the first teacher of his site, which would go on to host many more after him, of course. And fun fact, it is said that Louis XIV was Louis XIV teacher in fruit tree pruning because the king himself wanted to learn the basics of this technique. So here is the landscape in which La Cantini's works is situated. This painting is interesting because it provides a clear representation of the geography surrounding the Château de Versailles. You won't see the kitchen garden because he was built 10 years later than this painting. But it's interesting because we can see that the Château de Versailles is located in a broad valley, which has a relatively flat bottom, and it is surrounded by hills, as you can notice on both sides. And the chateau itself is perched on a small hill that allows it to overlook the valley. So this topography plays an important role in the overall landscape because it provides, like a ground setting, a dramatic backdrop for the chateau's perspective. And notably, as you can notice, the Grand Canal was designed to align with these hills. And secondly, these elevations also facilitate the water supply to the chateau by gravity. And the valley, in addition, is traversed by the Galley stream. I don't think we can see it here, but it's a small watercourse that played a key role in the site development, and it was because it was diverted and modified to supply the pond of the Swiss and the Grand Canal. And interestingly, this stream still flows today through the kitchen garden, actually underneath the kitchen garden today. The kitchen garden is located roughly here. So we will now take a closer look at the site, what existed on this site before its creation by La Cantini. Let's make things clear right away. The location was far from ideal. Those iconographic documents from the 1660s, predating the creation of the kitchen garden, give us a good sense of the nature of the space it occupied. So Originally, this area was a natural valley where water ran down from the surrounding hills. So these runoff waters were collected in a kind of basin where the potager was, up there, and combined with the silty clay nature of the soil, this made the site like a swampy area around the Galley stream. So these 3 ponds existing there, you can see them on both documents. And one of them was called Stinking Pond, which, as its name suggests, was probably far from pleasant. And it was indeed a breeding ground for diseases such as malaria, yellow fever, which decimated the workers and Swiss regiment soldiers who were tasked with draining the area and digging the pond of the Swiss. So as you can imagine, such a marsh terrain obviously posed a major challenge for engineers who had to drain and transform it to allow for the construction of the chateau and the kitchen garden. And Saint-Simon, who was perhaps exaggerating, as usual, described the initial state of Versailles as follows. Versailles, an ungrateful, sad place with no view, no woods, no water, no soil, as it is, all quicksand and swamp, with no air and therefore unhealthy. But La Cantigny was unequally unenthusiastic about the location because it was writing, the soils are about the kind one would hope to find nowhere. That's what he thought about the place. But, and in this engraving that dated like 4 years later than the previous one, we can still clearly see the ponds right at the location of the potager. No matter what, this location was imposed on La Cantigny for the convenience of Louis XIV promenade. It was near the castle. And anyway, it was an easy choice to accept because there were no high quality agricultural lands in the immediate vicinity. So they said, okay. And in reality, the location was convenient for many other reasons. Apart from being near the castle, it was near the Maison Bouche, here, the royal kitchens where the kitchen garden produced were sent and served to be served at the chateau. It was called close to the king's stables up there, which provided manure for the garden. It was close to the orangerie over there, where La Cantigny also worked. And most importantly, it was directly adjacent to the pond of the Swiss. And we'll see why this makes a lot of sense. So on this other engraving here, you have a view, a large view of the potager, which is located right here. So the pond of the Swiss is neighbor of the kitchen garden, and that is no coincidence. In this engraving, we see the view from the orangerie parterre of there, overlooking the pond of the Swiss. This is a truly extraordinary feature that spans 13 hectares. Believe it or not, the size of it could contain the entire chateau. And beyond its aesthetic functions, which is stunning, and it offering a superb vantage point from the orangerie terrace, the pond also served as a reservoir for supplying the Grand Canal. The pathway to the left over there of the image still exists. It is the one Louis XIV used when he was visiting his kitchen garden, and he was immensely proud of his kitchen garden. And the kitchen garden is depicted there. You can see some of its geometric garden enclosed by the walls. So there is a direct connection between the potager and the pièce d'eau des Suisses. We'll see why. The expansion of the pond of the Swiss dates to 1678, and that's precisely the creation of the potager. And there are two direct links. First, the soil removed from the potager, from the pond of the Swiss, was used to build the potager du Roi, elevating it and creating its large terrace. And second of all, the pond of the Swiss also served as an outlet for water collected by the network of drains that were running throughout the potager. So in this way, the potager also played a role in the chateau water supply system. So the work was huge, and it cost a considerable sum, 1 million pounds, which you could say is relatively modest compared to the cost of Versailles, which is roughly 100 million between 1663 and 1690, but still It's a lot compared to the surface area of the potager. So La Cantini used the excavated material from the pond of the Swiss to elevate the entire terrain of the potager, first because he wanted to prevent it from being overtaken by marshlands again. And he then added a second layer on top of the other. You can see it over there. If I can find my small, here we are. The second layer is here to build the big terraces around the Grand Carré. So, as you can imagine, these monumental works required the construction of an ingenious and very expensive machine, as carts could not traverse the marshlands. And in addition to these massive efforts, La Cantini worked to improve the soil. He was not very happy about the soil, so he brought better earth from the Satori hillside. He brought abundant manure to prevent soil crushing, because it's a common issue with silty soils. So this topic of soil transformation still remains an area of study for our teachers and our students here at the National School of Landscape Architecture, especially the ecology department, which regularly conducts soil core sampling with students. So you can see it on the right-hand side. And these illustrations you see are from the work of Marc Rimlard and Romain Bouquet, who are both teachers at the National School of Landscape Architecture. On the right-hand side, you can see like the different layers between the original soil and nowadays. I will now draw heavily on the work of Chiara Santini, who is a professor of garden history, and Antoine Jacobson, who is lecturer and researcher at the National School of Landscape Architecture. These engravings are by La Cantini. They don't exactly depict the potager itself, but still on the right bottom over there, that's very close to the appearance of the central Grand Carré. In fact, the potager has evolved slightly over time, particularly around the 70s, 80s, because at that time some walls were removed and on some places the ground was raised, especially in the fig orchard area. And this was done to adapt to new conditions that were milder than the little ice age which had just come to an end. So, and plus those walls were not very practical on a day-to-day basis. So for similar reasons of convenience, those two ramps of the terrace were changed to just allow for the passage of horse-drawn carts. They were transformed into ramps. And then there were changes on the 20th century, obviously, because buildings were constructed over there. You can see along the northern edge of the garden to support the development of the National School of Architecture, and we'll talk about it at length later. So these buildings were interested and still have some architectural significance. But despite these changes, as you may notice, the layout of the potager has not significantly altered since the 17th century. It remains quite similar to what Louis XIV has seen, and especially Louis XVI. It's very, very similar. So first, this is obviously a French ornamental garden. The garden unfolds around a Grand Carré over there, surrounded by a wide terrace and of 700 meters long. Encircling the Grand Carré are 28 small gardens, walled gardens, and each divided to accommodate different types of production, like the melon garden, the fig orchard, and so on and so forth. So the design clearly adopts the vocabulary of a French ornamental garden, because of this very geometric layout and composition, and this ribbon of small enclosed gardens, creating a sense of surprise and making the visit like with a unique charm. And that continues to be the case nowadays. And also there is a masterful interplay of volumes and viewpoints focused on the Grand Carré. So, and also one key feature that you will find here, the most beautiful gate still standing in Versailles from the 17th century. It was crafted in 1681 by Fordrin. And this is just a stunning gate. And Louis XIV himself knew it and passed through it when he was coming into the potager. However, you will neither find boxwood embroideries nor statues here. Why? Because this is a technical space. This is a production space. So The kitchen garden includes 4.5 kilometers of walls. That's huge. Surrounding a small garden sunken to designed to create like microclimates sheltered from harsh weather. And we can also even say that the potager was a climatic machine because it was specifically designed to maximize the heat and sunlight received by the plants to promote early fruiting and ripening. So you can imagine today how challenging it is to just maintain this garden and how difficult how many difficulties this design poses today. But by playing with different exposures, varieties, by protecting fruit trees with greenhouses, right, etc., La Cantini did wonders. For example, it could produce early season crops and figs nearly year-round, and that was nice for Louis XIV because it was very fun with figs. That it was a treat he greatly enjoyed, and the figgery in particular. The fig orchard was modeled after the orangerie, and it was one of La Cantini's proudest achievements. It was his own invention and the first of its kind to be built in France. And there you could find the 1,200 fig trees in pots, which were brought inside during the winter to be protected. So it was a production phase, perhaps certainly part of the backstage of the course, okay, but by no means a hidden one, because the potager is also a highly political space. It is part of a political narrative, and it showcases the ancient tradition of the king gardener, because, you know, from the kings of Babylon and the pharaohs, monarchs have always been seen as having like a secret connection to nature, tasked with maintaining order and fertility across the land. And Louis XIV proudly continued and clearly was included himself in this tradition. And when arriving through the King's Gate, Louis XIV would ascend a ramp flanked by trees, which led to the terrace of the Grand Carré. And from the ramp, no one could guess the existence of this terrace, which overlooked 3 hectares of perfectly arranged crops. So once on the terrace, the view opened up to reveal the spectacle below of gardeners bustling about in service of the king's glory. So this dominant position, physically and symbolically, reflected the careful staging of the king's power, who had power, and that was everywhere to be the case throughout Versailles. But here in the potager, by showcasing this so well-maintained, potager overflowing the fruits both in and out of season, Louis XIV presented himself as a divinely ordered monarch, a demiurge king, which mastered nature and who mastered nature and its seasons themselves. And it's also worth noting that the potager contributed to the culinary revolution of the service à la française. The ceremonial practices established in this new dining tradition also became a political tool for showcasing the king's power, as you're very well aware of. And another form of power that the kitchen garden displayed was obviously the agricultural and agronomic strength pride of France. Everywhere in Versailles, the estate functioned as a vast open-air showcase for the French industry. But in the potager, it was like the agricultural and agronomic techniques and power. And in this engraving from the La Cantini's book, you can see La Cantini over there. Well, here we are, offering figs to the king. And actually, he was offering figs to 2 bodies of the king as a monarch, but also the king as a representative of the nation. So you have to bear in mind that these advancements achieved in the potager benefited not only the king and the court, but of course the entire nation. And so Louis XIV took very much pride in his potager, and he enjoyed, honoring his guests with significant gifts of fruit and sending some to distant places. That's the words from La Cantini. And he also delighted in showcasing the potager to his distinguished guests during sumptuous ceremonial visits. Here in 1685, the Doge of Venice, and followed by the ambassadors of Siam in 1686, were all just like totally blown away, astonished by the marvels accomplished by La Cantini in what looked like a Garden of Eden. And the French journal, one of the first French journals of all times, the Mercure Galant, was recounting the Doge visit, and he praised a labyrinth of gardens that were immaculately maintained and filled with a prodigious number of fruit trees. One can assure with certainty that nothing more delightful or beautiful in gardening could possibly see. And for the visit of the Siamese ambassadors the following year, the Mercure described, at the end of one garden, another unfolds. From one terrace, one passes to another. After seeing fruits of all color, the view is captured by others, all different, and there is always something to surprise, inviting one to linger a while to examine it. And to my mind, this is exactly still the case when we stroll into the Potager now. The King's Kitchen Garden is also a place of innovation since its creation. It has been, and we continue to uphold this tradition today. It has served two purposes, the acclimatization of plants from distant lands, and also the development of techniques that have established its renown, such as espalier and counter-espalier pruning methods. And for instance, we have on this picture an extensive selection of squashes, that just beautiful squashes from all over France. The first one that you see here is called Galeuse. And it has excellent flesh, by the way. It was developed in the 19th century in Bordeaux, but we also have different varieties from very far away countries like Japan and Mexico. And in the 17th century, the kitchen garden adapted to the new needs of the culinary revolution, such as the replacement of exotic spices with aromatic herbs that enhance the flavor without overpowering it, and the diversification of fruits and vegetables. The garden primarily produced pears, figs, peaches, melons, asparagus, greens. Greens is a term that is used for salads consumed with flowers. Also strawberries, all of those were eaten fresh or made into jams. Even flowers and vegetables were made into jams and sweetened with cane sugar. Apple production was less prominent because it was considered as a poor man's fruit. And with the rise of refined matters, it disliked, the noisy chewing. So it was just not fashionable at all to eat apples. But still, there was some production of apples in the potager, and there still is. And during the 18th century, with the advent of major expeditions, the garden became an important acclimatization site, featuring several heated greenhouses that cultivated pineapples, coffee plants, cacao trees, avocado trees. Louis XV famously enjoyed serving coffee by himself to his guests. And the new crops often made headlines like buzz at court. It was just very, very important news at court, especially like, for instance, les petits pois. Madame de Sévigné, famous novelist in France, remarked, "The chapter of peas continues. The impatience to eat them, the pleasure of having eaten them, and the joy of eating them again are the three topics our princes have been discussing for 4 days." And Oudry, the famous painter, immortalized in the painting the first pineapple that was grown in the kitchen garden in France and cultivated for Louis XV. And the kitchen garden obviously served also as a testing ground for new techniques. In the 17th century, innovative methods were developed, including advancements in pruning, trellising, grafting. I don't know if you say that in English, but hotbed cultivation, growing under glass. And La Cantini himself used the microscope to examine seeds, and he also was part of research on the observable circulation of sap. And particularly, the art of fruit tree pruning was significantly advanced in the kitchen garden. And why did they prune in the first place? That's interesting. It's because these pruning enhanced fruit production, yielding larger and sweeter fruits by concentrating the flow of sap and also by allowing for maximum exposure to sunlight on each branch. And this practice is thought to originate from very old times, from an age-old observation, which is that when a branch breaks, the tree bears more fruit the following year. And the resulting forms were highly diverse, but they still operate on the same exact principle. You have to select the main structural branches called charpentier. We train them on supports in the desired shape. You maintain a sap puller branch to encourage continued growth, otherwise they don't grow anymore. And then you evenly distribute the spurs along the branches in order to avoid gaps. It's the same technique today, but it's a school of patience, I can tell you, because mastering these pruning techniques requires many, many years of practice. And some shapes, such as the one you will find in the Grand Paris, can take nearly 30 years to develop and to form. In fact, in the 19th century, it was the pinnacle of trained fruit trees. It was like, first, during La Cantigny, it was initially the intent was to ease harvesting and to cover walls as quickly as possible. But then it evolved in the 19th century to become far more intricate and, aesthetically driven. And this evolution was made possible by two inventions. First, the pruning shears in 1827, and second, the industrialization of wire production in mid-19th century, which simplified trellising, because previously branches had to be guided using strips or scrap of old fabric known as lock in French, and which was, of course, inevitably less precise. So in this picture, you can see very, very various forms in the garden of the Potager and our gardeners at work in the early 20th century, very, very, very beginning of the 20th century, maybe even 19th century, end of the 19th century. What is truly remarkable, really, in that kitchen garden is that it has never ceased to produce intensively despite the upheavals of history. And we are now celebrating 340 years of uninterrupted cultivation. This continuity was made possible through the massive application of organic amendments, of course, particularly manure from the chateau stables. And over this long period, the kitchen garden has supplied the tables of kings, 2 emperors, the republic, and now those individuals, you, me, who come to purchase fruits and vegetables directly from us in an ultra short supply chain. We harvest, we buy, we sell. And we cultivate 3/4 heritage varieties and 1/4 recent varieties. Recent varieties are essential for adapting the garden to new climate conditions. And heritage varieties, however, allow us to preserve the historical legacy of this style cultivation practices. And for instance, here, you have the Bon Chrétien d'hiver pear, the favorite pear of La Cantigny and Louis XIV. And we still grow this Bon Chrétien d'hiver, and this is precisely the same variety as in the time of Louis XIV, because it is propagated through grafting. So it's exactly the same fruit as what La Cantigny was and Louis XIV were eating. However, vegetables are another story, because they undergo sexual reproduction. We don't use grafting, and so they have changed considerably over time, and probably for the better, because for melons, for instance, here you can see the melons in the 17th century. They were big, very large, they would burst when ripe, and they were flavorless half of the time. So we can see that progress has its advantages. And similarly, for instance, strawberries, they were very tasty, but they didn't keep well. So we still feature heritage and forgotten vegetables in the garden, such as Jerusalem artichoke, white carrots, which had yet to turn orange, white eggplants, because the name of eggplant comes from the color of an egg that was their color at the origin. And but you have to be worried about this use of concept of heritage varieties, because it is more of a marketing term, as many so-called heritage varieties are actually recent creation, and the opposite is true. We cultivate approximately 250 varieties of vegetable and aromatic plants, including, of course, less common or rarely found vegetables that are rarely found in markets. What do we do with them? We harvest as fresh produce, or we process produce, and all of this will be certified organic agriculture by 2025. today, the kitchen arguably faces its main challenge, its greatest challenge of all times. It's reinventing itself to sustain production. The use of phytosanitary products were gradually reduced starting in the late 1990s and fully eliminated by 2010. Which means that we were ahead of the curve compared to other gardens. Let's bear in mind that the law banning phytosanitary products in public gardens in France only came into effect in 2017. So unfortunately, at that time, when we stopped phytosanitary products, many aging trees were already weakened by vigorous pruning, and they should have been renewed 30 or 40 years ago. So they could not survive the withdrawal of these treatments, and that led to widely publicized controversy that hurt us very much about the maintenance of the gardens. And since then, we have continuously refined, we've worked hard on our methods, practices to protect our plants and to enhance biodiversity, because it's also an important aspect of gardens today. And it is important to keep in mind anyway that the garden is a living entity. It is often bound to evolve over time continuously, and it would be just impossible to freeze it in time. It makes no sense. And it makes it fundamentally different in that respect from built heritage. And what is, to our mind, particularly interesting about the approach we take is that we follow the garden. We try to work with it on this garden in order to be able to evolve in response to environmental challenges and new uses expected by the public, while remaining as faithful as possible to its original design and purpose. And in this respect, we truly believe that the NSP's approach is exemplary in the true sense of the word for other many gardens. And we think that if we succeed, basically any garden can succeed, considering the specific aspects of this climatic machine that I just talked about. And in our case, for example, on these pictures, you can see one of our improvements or just differences that we allow us. All over the garden, the emphasis on linear structure is present. That's true throughout the entire kitchen garden. So we maintain the structuring of lines while allowing ourselves some liberty. In these pictures, for instance, you can see on the left the garden as it was in 1990, with espalier trees everywhere. These rows of trees have greatly suffered since then, as I was telling you, and we need obviously to massively replant, including those rows of trees. But on the right, we reinterpret some of the lines, not all of them, but some of them, by introducing new plantings such as flower meadows, which brings to our mind poetry and biodiversity, enrich the soil as green manure, and protect trees from certain pathogens by making it harder for them to jump from row to row. So inter-row planting attracts beneficial insects like ladybugs, overflies, which prey on aphids. The art of espalier is a perfect example of heritage know-how that needs to be reinvented to be able to transmit it. We obviously continue to perpetuate this very unique expertise, which is mastered by a very, very small number of gardeners worldwide and is at risk of disappearing because less and less gardeners know how to. And it is now listed as part of France's intangible cultural heritage, thanks to the initiative of the Friends of the Potager du Roi Association. Additionally, it must be adapted to climate change and to a level of pathogenic pressure unlike anything seen in previous centuries. So when pruning a tree, it is inevitably injured and weakened. So that makes it easier for pathogens to take hold. And plus, training in espalier further exposes it to sunlight, which is specifically originally the objectives of the technique. So these forms are therefore difficult to maintain under today's climatic and pathogenic condition. And that it is also interesting to notice in that respect that in the 17th century forms proved to be better adapted than those from the 19th century because they are more respectful of the tree's physiology. So we need to replant half of the trees by 2034, which is a huge effort for our gardeners and for ourselves. And so we launched a sponsorship campaign for our trees to help finance this effort, but also, to create a bond with our public. You know, we're always trying to catch two birds in one stone, and it is to our mind by weaving a human and emotional connection with its visitors that the garden remains alive. And this is something that really highly matters to us. An important specificity of the kitchen garden is also its use as a place for transmitting knowledge and know-how from its very beginning. And as we have seen, La Cantini set the example. Deputy Jules Laurent proposed the creation of the school. He said, of the school, National School of Horticulture. He said, we have in this King's Kitchen Garden an establishment unrivaled in the world, offering a field for experimentation that cannot be found anywhere else. So the National School of Horticulture was established here in 1874. And at that time, it trained all the great gardeners of France, and actually of France, but even many from much further away, notably Japan. Then, starting in the early 20th century, when it became a national higher school, its teaching evolved towards a degree in horticultural engineering. So pedagogical exercises left the garden to take place in laboratories that were just built for that purpose just at that time, and that deprived the garden of much of its workforce, unfortunately. Today, we are the National Higher School of Landscape Architecture. This Higher School of Landscape Architecture was born within its ground, inside the National School of Horticulture in 1945, and it was de Gaulle in 1945 who initiated the creation of a landscape section because he wanted the landscape designers to contribute to the reconstruction of France post-war. So the school itself was established in 1976 from this section. And in fact, the National Higher School of Horticulture left the Potager to relocate to Angers, but the National School of Landscape refused to leave the kitchen garden. And so we're still there. And we will celebrate next year the 50th anniversary of our presence on the site of the kitchen garden. So the School of Landscape now occupies the entire space of the site, and each year we train about 60 landscape architects, and they work across all. I don't know if you're familiar with the type of work landscape architects do, but they mainly they work across all types of territories, from small to very large scales, and they help territories adapt to change, whether producing major strategic documents, supporting urban development projects, contributing to the preservation plans for natural sites, etc., etc. There are very, very various works that they are able to do. And we also train about roughly 20 garden designers who are, in fact, not initial training, but they are individual in career transition from actually a very wide variety of fields, such as banking, consulting, communication, design, whatever. They're just passionate about garden, and they come here to just totally change career and become garden designers. And it's an extremely good training that we offer them. So some lessons are taught in the garden during the initial year, mostly, of the curriculum, but however, our students quickly leave the kitchen garden to explore territories of all scales and types throughout France. But our continuing education activities at the scale of the garden help forge a direct connection between the school and its site. And to further anchor the tradition of training within the garden once more, we will launch new programs starting in the fall of 2025, beginning with an elite Master Gardener training course, and that will be a hint to the activities of the Potager du Roi during the 19th century with the National School of Horticulture. Because it seems to us particularly necessary to equip the garden sector with qualified practitioners, especially to care for parks and gardens of significant heritage value, such as ours, facing climate and environmental drastic changes. And All gardens face these changes. All gardens face the same critical shortage of skilled professionals. So I hope this will help. And another unique feature is that the Kitchen Garden is a school garden, a campus that is open to the public. And in this way, we believe we fulfill our mission of knowledge transmission in a different way for a broad, very broad audience, like including visitors, school groups, garden enthusiasts, culinary aficionados, landscape lovers, like everyone's welcome. So the Forge building that we will have a picture of it later has just been restored with the support of the WMF and the Lambert Foundation, and it is located in this garden that you see right here. And it is actually the most lively and joyful place in the kitchen garden. And in the summer, it's just delightful to stay there, and it houses a refreshment bar. And the garden is obviously a magical space for strolling. And what it makes it interesting is you can feel the changing seasons through all those fruits and production. The landscape is continuously renewed with the changing seasons. And visitors come here to recharge and reconnect with nurturing nature. And also, it is a place to discover its community of living beings, like its biodiversity, but also us, like students, gardeners, teachers. We like this type of interaction with the public. The Kitchen Garden is now investing in the quality and in the generosity of its hospitality. And it has, to that aim, it has particularly reintroduced a horticultural dimension with the addition of flowers, including in the Grand Carré, like you can see here. In fact, there were no flowers in the garden during La Cantini's time, except in a small location like near his residence, but otherwise there were none. But this reintroduction honors the legacy of the National School of Horticulture, as well as pleasing our visitors. And we are currently also working with the WMF to implement garden signage that will enhance the sensory and educational aspects of the visit by providing a valuable and easy to understand knowledge. We also organize big events, weekend events, such as the Flavor event. This was the event that took place in 2024. And they are very widely open to the public. Most of them are free of charge, and they're featuring gourmet stands, discovery workshops, and so on and so forth for very, very different publics, from very young to as old as possible. And also one event that we take part of is the Architecture and Landscape Biennial in Versailles. And we take part through exhibition and conferences. In 2022, there was an exhibition in the Potager that was organized by Coloco about the primacy of living beings. And this year, we will highlight the contribution of landscape architects to in adapting our territories to climate change with Agence Terre, which is one of the big agencies, also landscape agencies in France. So we have the responsibility of preserving and enhancing our historic legacy, our historic site. That's where we were born, like the National School of Landscape Architecture. And this is obviously something we very much care about, but also something that poses a significant challenge for education and institutions like ours. Our supervising body, the Ministry of Agriculture, provides investment funding and a lot of investment funding, but it is not sufficient. Given the scale, the enormous scale of the financial effort, which amounts to several tens of millions of euros, we cannot accomplish this alone, and that's why we're seeking generous patrons. The site's web is multifaceted, and we believe this should appeal broadly because you can find whatever you're interested in, you can find in what we are trying to implement, like heritage preservation, education and transmission, ecological and climate awareness, organic shortcut circuit production, the history of food and gastronomy in France, etc., etc. And so we've launched the process, and this photo illustrates our latest major building project, the comprehensive restoration of the roofs of all the historic buildings that were constructed by Jules Avion Mansart in the 17th century for La Cantine. And most of the funding came from the Ministry of Agriculture and WMF, and also with the additional support from the Fondation du Patrimoine. So it was way time to launch an ambitious restoration project, because it is long overdue. The potager undergoes large-scale restoration efforts roughly every 100 years. So both its built structures and its living heritage are in need of attention. And because the last major intervention dates back to 1880, so that leaves us at least 40 years behind. So this is why we have launched a centennial restoration project at the Potager du Roi, aptly named the project of the century, but that for a reason. And the ambition is obviously first to preserve the site. So that means obviously replanting the garden, restoring the walls, implementing sustainable water management, ensuring the preservation of historic buildings, roofs, and enclosures, etc., etc. But our vision is ambitious, and it goes much further. It's about aiming to enhance the site's role as a showcase of French history and the knowledge of gardening, landscape, food, French cooking, etc. And as a third layer, we also seek to solidify its identity as a teaching garden by developing and sharing expertise that ensures the climate resilience of gardens and landscapes alike. So for instance, our plans include improving visitor experiences with multi-level garden signage, enriched and thematic tour routes. So whatever you're interested in, you will find the garden, and also an interpretation center offering a broad programs of awareness activities for different targeted publics. And we try to establish the potager as a meeting and a sharing hub for the gardening community that will foster exchanges of best practices to ensure these sites can be passed on to future generations, because that is what it is all about, passing on those incredible gardens to future generations. So we are particularly happy and proud that the WMF, the World Monuments Fund, has been supporting us since 1992. In 2018, we are actually added to the WMF watch list. We're especially grateful to the Lombard Foundation for their continued support of our garden and school. So on this picture, you can see the gate that was renovated thanks to these fundings. And so the latest operation, the forge over there, that was also renovated thanks to these fundings. And since 2018, we have actually received over 800,000 euros in grants. So we truly hope this support continue, not only to preserve the exceptional site of the King's Kitchen Garden. Of course, it's worth it, but it's also about allowing parks and gardens worldwide to hopefully benefit from the knowledge acquired and shared in terms of climate and environmental adaptation of those heritage gardens. Thank you for your attention. We hope to welcome you soon in the kitchen garden. I hope I gave you a good overview and insight about what the potager looks like and why you should come for a visit. And of course, I'm open to any question at this stage.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for that excellent presentation. So you have certainly inspired us to pay you a visit to see this fantastic Potager du Roi. Is it open in the winter?
No, it's closed for it's been closed for 3 months, like during the harsh weather of the winter, but then the rest of the year it's open.
Okay. And where is the public entrance to the Potager du Roi?
It's Rue du Maréchal Joffre, like near the stunning, beautiful cathedral of Versailles, that 18th century cathedral, beginning of the 18th century, worth the visit as well. No need to mention. And then right opposite the street, you will find the entrance to the Potager du Roi. But you have to take time, because it almost takes 2.5 hours to just stroll around the potager if you want to visit the 10 hectares of the site. It's quite big indeed, and there are different places, various gardens within the garden that makes the whole interest of the visit.
Are there guided tours?
Yes, there are, and there are a lot of different guided tours. If you're interested in historic guided tours, there are conservateurs. I don't know how you say that in English. If you're interested in food, there are chefs cooks that also make visits. If you're interested in gardening techniques, you have also gardeners who makes excellent visit. You may find also tutoring on the website on YouTube by our gardeners if you want to get an insight about what they can offer you during those visits.
Okay, if you just show up at the gate, can you come, or do you have to reserve a time?
No, you can show up I mean, there are open hours, of course, but you can show up anytime during these open hours. I think there are, I don't know how many guided visits during the weekends there are, but quite a lot. And during the events weekend, such as the flavor weekend, then just like ongoing activities that are very worth the trip. Yeah.
Excellent. And you showed the beautiful photograph of the King's Gate that has been beautifully restored. Can people enter the garden through the King's Gate or anymore?
No, most of the time it's closed. The King's Gate is closed. It is this path that Louis XIV used to take that I was mentioning like near the pond of the Swiss is mainly closed, but is open during some events. And for instance, this year in 2025, we'll have a new biennial, as I was mentioning, Architecture and Landscape Biennial of Versailles. And then we open the King's Gate for that specific event.
Couple of specific questions. There's another garden next door on the other side of the King's Gate. Pretty well-known gardener, André Lenôtre, was a little involved next door. Did Lenôtre and La Cantini collaborate at all?
Well, obviously they knew one another because they had worked during all their career together. But we don't believe Lenôtre actually intervened in the potager. This is an area of research for researchers. They probably know better than I do. But as far as I know, Lenôtre would not interact in this production garden. We believe it's the entire work and project of La Cantini, even the design of it. That was La Cantini's own likes, that's what he liked pretty much.
Would you, I don't think you mentioned it, but would you, if you didn't, would you remind us where Louis XIV discovered Le Cantini along with some of the other people he brought over to build Versailles?
Okay, I wasn't there to know how it happened, but Louis XIV heard about La Cantini together with the other team that worked in Vaux-le-Vicomte, and so he embarked everyone. He took everyone, including La Cantini, and the other ones we know, but La Cantini is not as well known. Sorry, there were questions about grafting. What I understood, I don't know if that question, that was your question, but the thing is, for fruit, that you have the exact same fruit as La Cantini and Louis XIV knew, because there is no reproduction. It's the same DNA. There's no changes in DNA. So it's the same plant. That's why, I mean, the fruit is the same. And you pretty much look, when you look at engravings and you look at pictures, you see that they look alike very much. And that's no coincidence. It's the same. It's not the same with vegetable, because there is a reproduction at every generation. And so there were changes in the vegetables that were very important. And so there are some old ancient varieties, so-called ancient varieties, but we're not absolutely 100% sure that they were exactly the same as what we grow right now.
Okay. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up here now, but thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Alexandra, and thank you also to Richard Chapeau and Patricia Bonnet for their helpful comments that you couldn't see, but in the chat function, while you were talking, Alexandra, Richard, and Patricia were providing a lot of complimentary explanation and information. Thank you to our partners for their
Thank you.
support and to everyone who joined us today. And we hope that you will join us again next week at the same time, same place, for a presentation about the Opéra Comique to be given by Agnès Terrier. So thank you again, Alexandra.